Well, the explosion, and here we are in the middle of Silicon Valley, and what this part of the country has done to change the culture of the world's economy in the last 20 years, 25 years is nothing short of incredible. I mean, entrepreneurship has gone from something that people thought of as the province of wackos and weirdos and strange people to a kind of thing that kids aspire to do and be. I mean, that's an amazing transformation. And I think what's happened over the course of that transformation is we've discovered that the definition of what it takes to be good is a lot broader than we thought. That many different kinds of people using many different kinds of strategies can be effective at starting businesses and achieving. That I think that's been the great kind of take-home lesson of this entrepreneurial explosion of the last generation.
So my role's changed a ton. Well, I work really on two areas now, which is strategy and then coaching our entrepreneurs. So strategy, I work with Brad and our other leaders, trying to help our leaders see the future and make the big strategic calls. What's really most important? How do we know? And then work with our entrepreneurs. We're a collection of entrepreneurs, basically. We've got a couple hundred entrepreneurial projects going on inside the company at any one time. And each one of those is like a little startup. I mean, they've got a customer in mind. They've got a problem they're trying to solve to improve people's lives so fundamentally. And there are challenges. So helping grow our entrepreneurs and then grow the culture around them to allow great entrepreneurs to invent things that change the world and do that from within Intuit with a huge reach to be able to get the inventions out into the hands of millions and change the lives of tens of millions of people.
Because I mean, goes to this issue of learning strategies. That there's a kind of learning, what we call compensation learning, where you are learning out of weakness, not out of strength. You're learning from your failures and and that kind of learning is a lot harder to do, but it's a lot more powerful. So the task of the small business owner who is facing a whole series of disadvantages and weaknesses relative to much larger competitors, there's no question it's a harder way to go. But if you can pull it off, you'll end up in a much stronger position. If you can be one of those people who can do compensation learning. And in that book I talk, for example, about how many entrepreneurs are dyslexic. And that's a beautiful example of that. Some portion of people who suffer from quite a serious learning disorder, and not all of them, some portion of them manage to turn that around into an advantage, to take a basic inability to read and turn that into developing skills of delegation and leadership and problem solving and developing an incredible resilience, the ability to cope with failure. I mean, they turn a weakness into a strength, and they end up being far more powerful than they would be as a result. And when I interviewed all these successful dyslexic entrepreneurs for that book, what was amazing was that all of them said, I did not succeed despite my disability, I succeeded because of it. And that's the crux of it. And I so think there is a silver lining to many of the clouds that small business owners face.
I mean, the secret sauce, I think it changes, it doesn't change. The secret sauce is about relationships. It's about building a product that works, and then it's about delivering something that actually matters, that's valuable. It's funny, you think it's only time tracking, right? But put yourself again in the shoes of a small business owner. On average, we will save a small business owner between 3% and 11% on their overall labor expenses. And that's usually the single largest line item on their P&L. So
early on, when the company was before we even had our first product out, we'd build a version of it, and then we would bring in test audiences and have them test it to see if they could figure it out without us saying anything. And they couldn't, so then we'd redesign it, and then we'd test again, and then we'd redesign it and test again. Over time, we kind of lost some of that dedication to running experiments. And it became whose opinion, and you'd build, and it was the loudest opinion in the room, or the boss's opinion. And that produced a number of failures, things that just didn't work. Customers didn't buy, or they bought and it didn't produce the desired effect when they bought it. So the thing I've learned about life and companies is to set up a culture where you make decisions based on fast, cheap experiments. The very thing you were talking about. If you got an idea, figure out, okay, what's the leap of faith assumption? Let's go try it. And don't debate it, try it. And then we learn from trying. Now, a bunch of those don't work. Then we learn from the things, why didn't it work? And that teaches us something we didn't know before that may be the fulcrum, the pivot to a new idea. And some of those do work, or most of it worked, but other pieces didn't, and we learn by doing, not by debating in a conference room. So this set up your company so that people throughout the company can take their idea and run the experiment. That produces great entrepreneurs and great learning, a continuous stream of learning. Because I guess the learning begins when you first get real people trying your idea for real.
Our kind of definition of what it takes to be a successful entrepreneur is expanding. I think we're beginning to understand that lots of traits that we once thought of as just problematic have unexpected benefits. Like I remember once reading someone who was pointing out that basically most of the great research scientists in the world have OCD. And you kind of have to have OCD if you want to be, because what are you doing? You're spending hours and hours in a lab doing the same incredibly precise experiment over and over and over again and measuring your results to the slightest. That's OCD behavior. That has found a beautiful home, right? Has found a world where you need to be that way, right? And that, I read that, it's like, that's lovely. These are people who we drugged up and pushed off to the fringes 2 generations ago, and now we've found a home for them in labs where they are doing incredibly productive and satisfying work.
Yeah.